Okie dokie. Mm-hmm.
Lighting is always something that's very difficult for me. I never feel like I know what I'm doing. And at first, I thought my lighting was going well for this world, and I was trying some things, and it was okay. And then I
Mm-hmm.
kept playing with it more, and all of a sudden, I screwed it up really, really badly. And I don't know how to fix it. It's now saying something like there are overlapping UVs, and I've never really understood
Right.
how to work with the UVs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got these big black, well, dark brown marks on my little benches, and I do have two light sources in there because I have they're street lamps.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a directional light coming from one street lamp this direction, and one coming from a street light coming this direction, and somehow it got all messed up, and I just looked at it and said, "Oh my gosh!" And I haven't touched it in a
Mm-hmm.
couple of months to
Okay.
fix it for him.
Okay.
so, so help me.
No problem. Well,
Okay.
we'll cover that definitely. We'll do that first. Hi, Pox.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I showed this world to Pox too, so he knows what I'm talking about. I was telling her about the stage where the lighting is all messed up. I was telling her about that.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Pox said he
Okay.
would try to fix it for me, but I
You're
really want to know what I did
really
wrong.
weirdly laggy. Let me re-enter. Wait, give me a
Okay.
second.
Okay.
Well, what I'll do while we're waiting for Pox coming in, I'll just get to Blender and we'll close that. Well, actually, we'll
Okay.
just start
Oh, that's pretty.
a new. Well, yeah, we might get back to that. Um, but what we'll do to start with, I'm just going to do something simple. I always move my box up so
Okay.
it sits on the ground because I'm funny like that. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
anything kind of down in the ground because, well, I'll end up building a whole world around it and then find that half of it's buried when I bring it into banter. So I always move everything up a bit. So we've got a box on the ground.
Right.
What I'm going to do, go into material view
That's a lot
and
better.
I'll create a material, just something simple. So I'm just going to grab something out of me downloads. Any one of these will do. Let's just try. I tell you what, let's look for. You know what? Let's just use this because it's the first one I've come to. So it's got a rock texture. Now, if we go into UV editing, you'll see if I select everything here, this is the box that's unwrapped. And it's unwrapped as one
Okay.
island, as one piece. And what it's done is it's clearly just added some seams along some of these edges to unwrap it so that eventually the whole thing just looks like this. It's, if you can imagine, it's like if it was a piece of paper, a box, and you'd unwrapped it and laid the whole piece of paper flat, this is what you would have.
Mm-hmm.
Now it may be, I'm just going to turn on material view here as well, that you want the same, let's just say this is a picture of some sort and you want the same picture on every face of this box. Let's see if I can just grab something else. I'll just go back into shading here so I don't confuse myself. Let's see if there's a picture I can just grab that's in here somewhere. God, I've got too much stuff in me downloads. There's a picture. We'll just grab that of a lantern because I used that before. Doesn't look like anything because the lantern
No.
is on it, you know, you've got different bits of it on each face. So clearly
Okay.
this section here is this face here. So if we
Right.
wanted a lantern on every face, what we'd have to do is select each face and unwrap it so that it fills the picture. This is how I would do it anyway. And all I've done there, I've hit U twice. So it's U for unwrap and then U again for unwrap, a basic unwrap. You could do it by using the menus, UV unwrap, but I always use shortcuts. Just U twice.
Okay.
We might want the lantern to be the right way around, so I want to rotate this by 90 degrees. Same with this one. And this one. I'm not rotating it in this view, because if I rotate that, it's going to totally distort the box. We want to rotate the UV, and we want that by minus 90.
Okay, right.
So you hover over the actual UV editor part and rotate it. So I've done that wrong. That now needs to be rotated by 180. So we've got a lantern on every face. However, the trouble is now we've got overlapping UVs. We've got all these different boxes that are all occupying the same space. And what that means is that if you use this UV map to bake your lighting, it's going to bake the shadows on one face and then the next face and then the next face. And you're going to have all these shadows overlapping each other, and it's going to end up with just black faces, basically. Or if you've got them like slightly overlapping, like this, for instance, you'll get a big blotchy black patch here. I don't know if that makes sense, but I can show you.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to do a very quick, where did I put it? I'll just use the folder I'm using at the moment, assets, and I'm just going to export it as box, I guess. And if we go into Unity, we should have the box I've just exported. There we go. If we hit F, it does the same as hitting the period key on the numpad in Blender will also zoom in on the selected item. With Unity, hitting F will zoom in on your selected item as well. So we'll just bring in the material as well, and to do that I'm just going to go to shading for whatever reason, doesn't matter. We'll bring up the lantern and just do image, save a copy, and I'm going to save that into D, Banter Projects, Assets, we'll just call it lantern.jpg, and there it is. So it works without any lighting. I haven't even got a direct light in here, so we'll add one in. Light, directional light, and we'll mark this as to contribute to global illumination, and then see what happens. I'll just clear the bake data because I've been using Bakery to bake, but we'll just use Unity's built-in bacon. Hopefully it's not going to take forever because it's just a cube.
Right. Oh.
Lordy, I mean, really, it's a basic direct light, and it's telling me it's going to take 10 minutes to bake it. This is why I use Bakery, because I hate this. Okay, now it's decided to hurry up and do its stuff. So, for whatever reason, let's just get this set to baked first of all. And I should have said we want shadows. Of course we do. Mark that as important. Now it's baking the shadows, which it should have done. And you know, I should have also, Let's just cancel that. Set this to GPU so it's a bit quicker. And I have no idea why that's worked, because it shouldn't have done. But if we select this, you can see it's saying the game object has overlapping UVs. And if you double click on this, you can see it's exactly the same way as it is in Blender. We've got one box rather, and there's 6 of these boxes all overlapping one another, which simply doesn't work properly, I guess.
Okay.
As I say, I've no idea why it's decided it's going to bake correctly for this, because it shouldn't. But yeah, we've got overlapping UVs, and if you choose baked UV overlap here, you can see what the issue is. Anywhere where there's red, it's not going to work very well, because that indicates that there's going to be overlaps and you're going to get shadows bleeding between islands, and it just looks horrible. I'll see if I can do a better example if I make this a little bit more complicated. We'll just extrude that out a bit, and we'll extrude that in a little bit. UV editing. I'm going to see what happens there, maybe. What I'll do is I'll deliberately overlap some of these. And just see what happens. Okie, and we can see them overlapping there. I mean, it may be, for instance, that you deliberately want that. While that's baking, we'll go back to, I'll just save that as, I don't know, box. And we'll go back to my shed that I had. So an example would be this thing here, this plant. I've got one image which is over here, of a leaf, and then this plant, I've used that one image on every single leaf. So if we open it up in UV editing, why have I got that? That's not right. You know what it is? This is doing my head in. There we go. You can tell I'm tired. I've literally just got home from work a short while ago. So every single face of this is the leaf. If I can find it. Leaf maple. And so I'm not going to have an image that's got hundreds of leaves that all look the same. I'm using the same image over and over again for each leaf. So you can't get away from it. That is exactly what I want. I can't help it if every single island is occupying the same space for a leaf. And that's where we'd definitely get issues. Now, have I got here some problems with me bacon? You can see we have. So here, we've got bleeding here. There's bits that's not working right. I haven't got generate light map UVs on. But there's 2 ways of fixing it anyway. So you can see we've got baked UV overlap there, and we've got all these bits, these red bits, where there's going to be light, like shadows bleeding between places, and it's just going to look horrible. So there's two ways of fixing it. You can either select your asset that we've brought in and click on Generate Light Map UVs if you haven't already, and apply. And that will actually create a second set of UVs, which Unity will use itself to bake the lighting on. Unity doesn't do a great job generally of creating its own light map UVs. Quite often it can be very inefficient and give you lots of empty spaces. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it's not bad. You can see it has unwrapped everything kind of semi-properly. And it's got some padding in between the islands. If you still find that you've got some red lines in between your islands, you can increase the scale in the light map, which will fix it, because it'll make the UV bigger and increase the gaps in between them. Don't do what a lot of people do and think it's going to fix it, where you increase the padding in the light map UV settings. Is that where I'm looking? No, it's not. Hang on. Is it under the lighting section? There's somewhere, there we go, light map padding. That doesn't increase the gap between the islands. It increases the margin around the whole UV map, so that when you get several objects in your scene, all with their own UV map, it prevents bleed between objects, not just between islands. So you need to increase the scale in the light map to fix it. The other way of doing it, if you find that this is horrible, you've got tiny islands and loads of gaps between them, and this is what I usually do, is instead of generating the light map UVs, I'll actually do it myself in Blender, because Unity will always use the second UV channel as the light map channel. So down here where you've got your little green hoojima flip, we'll just create a second UV channel, and I usually rename it to light map, so I don't, it just makes it obvious for me. And then I'll unwrap it, and usually for something like this I'll just do a standard unwrap, except the stem here doesn't have any seams. We need to tell it where it's going to unwrap, so I'll make sure that there's no caps at the ends, which there isn't. It's open. So all we need to do is select an edge, mark it as a seam. We can select the whole thing by just hitting L. You can even do it, click seam, and it'll only select bits that you've isolated if you've cut different sections up of an object. And then just unwrap that. And we've got the seam unwrapped. I'll probably want to straighten that out, or if it had a texture on it, I would straighten it out. For the shadows, yeah, I probably should, to make them look best. So to do that, find a box somewhere that's relatively straight. Go into vertex mode, and we'll select two of them. Align auto, two at the top, two at the bottom, and then the two sides. Align auto, align auto. Go into face mode, select the face you've just straightened out, select everything else that's linked, right click and choose follow active quads, and that's straightened the whole thing out. So if you've got a texture on there, it'll look way, way, way better. I've pressed Control and I and select everything else, And that actually doesn't look bad, to be honest. I might just leave that as it is. Maybe needs a little bit more padding. I'm not sure. Let's try it. UV, Pack Islands, and we'll just increase this a little bit more. So it's got a bit more space. Probably should have done it with everything, shouldn't I? UV, Pack Islands. That'll do. So that's going to be our UV map without any overlap now. And then we would just export that as it is. And when you bake it in Unity, it will just automatically work. Or it should do. Let's give that a name. We'll call it Vine. And we're going to stick it in there again. Banter projects. Assets. Vine. I'll export it. Bring it in. I'll save the image for the leaf. Save a copy. We don't... Lordy. Yeah, I do want the alpha. Save a copy. And we'll also have the actual leaf itself. Actually, that was the ivy I've just done. The leaf itself is, or the maple leaf has got its own alpha channel, so I didn't need that. We'll just save that bit. So it doesn't look like anything there. It doesn't have any transparency, but that's fine. It's because we haven't actually created a material. So I'm not going to bother creating a shader for this. Let's just delete that because I copied it, saved it before. Just for speed, I'm going to use a built-in shader, which I don't recommend you do, but you know, hey ho, I'm not going to spend ages wasting time. So we'll just use standard, make it a cutout, stick in the maple leaf and drag it onto the leaves, and there we go. So if I was to then mark that as ready for global illumination and bake it, we'll see what happens. Have I still got this direct light set up properly? Yes, I have. Right, it's thinking about it. And there we have some shadows working. The leaves that are underneath are dark, the leaves that are on the top are light. Yeah, it works. And you can even see a bit of a dappled effect where the light's going through the leaves. And we've got it. Yeah, that's working okay. So that is done by creating your own light map, as I say, just by making a second UV channel and unwrapping it so that nothing's overlapping. But that's basically it. As I say, if it's an asset that you brought in, I would recommend, if it's not something that you've made yourself, I would recommend just ticking that box for generate light map UVs. And that should fix it. You just need to rebake your lighting after that. Does that make sense, first of all? Because I'm happy to go over it again. And
it makes sense. Can I duplicate it when I sit down and try myself? But yeah, thank you. That helped a lot.
Well, this is being recorded. As I say, I record all the sessions, so the video will be up on YouTube, and you can always take your time to go through it as slow as you want. to have another look. But I'm
Right,
more
right.
than happy to cover it again. I would much rather somebody asked a question 10 times than to ask once or not ask at all and then just get totally frustrated, because you'd be so surprised at how easy and how quick it is once you understand what's actually happening in the background.
Yeah.
And it is literally just a case of, like I say here, we don't have any of these yellow warnings now. We can go into baked UV overlap. The yellow one is the UV for the vine, and it's absolutely fine. This is the UV map that we created in Blender. There's no red lines, there's no overlap, there's going to be no shadows bleeding in between islands, overlapping between islands. So it just will work. And if you do find that happens, don't panic about it. Just increase the scale a little bit. There's another thing you can do. You don't need to double click on this, and I tend to use this method and then zooming in with your scroll wheel, and you don't have to. What you can do is you can pull this little menu down, and there's a section here somewhere for UV overlap as well. And you can see here we've got some overlap down here. You can actually see live on your model where you've got problems with the UVs.
Okay.
We've got it all around here. It's all overlapping. That looks awful. But all I would do is select that. We could maybe increase the scale to 2. Try baking again, see what happens. Yeah, we've still got a little bit of a problem, but it's narrower. And this issue down here is much smaller than it was. So yeah, just play around with it until it looks right. And don't panic if you see any bits that look red in this view. Don't worry about it. Have a look at it shaded and think, well, actually, does it look bad? It doesn't matter if it says you've got overlapping UVs. If the actual object itself looks okay, don't change it. You don't have to fix it if it doesn't look horrible. It'll still work. It's really just to fix any issues that are obviously there. You just think, oh God, that looks awful. Let's see if we can fix it. And then try and address any of those red patches on your objects. But absolutely not necessary if you think it looks fine. So, yeah, let's just get back to these items. We'll just get rid of them because I don't want them anymore. We'll get rid of that. I might just leave that. In. That's fine. I'm going to set up my directional light, so I'm using bakery for speed now. So I'm just going to add the bakery direct light script, and that's us ready to go. Check I'm set up here. So back to Blender. I know I have covered making a shed in the past, and making tri-planar shaders, so you don't even have to bother unwrapping it if you can't be bothered. Don't worry, it's not important. I'm going to show you how to do that as well in a little bit. But last week what I did was we covered how to randomly scatter objects in Blender, but also how to randomly scatter the same objects in Unity. And I did that with some rocks that I just generated using, basically the rock generator in Blender, which is okay. It's nice for your scenes, but it does need a bit of work to make them work well in Unity, because they tend to be very high poly. By the time you've applied all the modifiers, you've got, I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. If you just want a couple of rocks in your world, you're going to get a lot of frame rate drop if you have a lot of these in there. So don't use that if you don't want to. And you don't even have to, You don't even have to scatter them in Unity if you don't want, because there is another brilliant way of creating rocks, which I want to show today. I think you'll have a lot of fun with this. I have huge amounts of fun. So we'll start off with a cube, which I'll just bring over here for now. And I'll maybe make it half the size because it's a bit big, and we'll just apply. Oh, I've went and set the origin to the centre, to the world origin. So we'll set it back to the centre of the geometry of the cube. And then if you go into your preferences in Blender and do a search for, what's it called? Can't remember what it's called now. Let's see what I've got it in me shortcuts. Cell fracture, that's it. So in your preferences, in your add-ons, I'm not sure if it's in Blender 4.2, so I'm just going to open it to have a check while that's opening in the background, because it's it tends to be very slow for me, so I still use an old version 3.4. Just do a search in your preferences for cell fracture. You'll find it here, and just tick it and enable it. When 4.4 loads up, we'll have a look and see if it's still an add-on, or if you need to search for it as an extension. Edit, preferences, add-ons, cell. No, it doesn't seem to be in there. So let's have a look in extensions. Search extensions. Cell fracture. Yeah, it's an extension. So just install it. Once you've got cell fracture installed, if it's something I know I'm going to use an awful lot, I'll usually, you call this by using the object. Is it object? And under quick effects, you've got cell fracture. If you right click, you can add it to your quick favorites, which basically means bring up your hit Q for quick favorites. Everything that I've added to me quick favorites is in there, so I can get to it quickly. And if you hit that and hit OK, all it's done is I'll hide the original cube. It's created all these cells, but they're just cubes, and it's only created like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, which is not ideal. But we'll bring back the original cube. If we subdivide this cube, you can either do it by adding the subdivision surface modifier and hit simple and increase this to maybe about 4. Or you can hit Control and 4, and that'll do the same thing, and just change that to simple. When you apply it, we've subdivided that quite a bit. You don't have to use 4, use less, but I've got lots of subdivisions, so it's got something to work with. Use that cell fracture modifier again, or add-on rather, and if we hit OK, we've got something like this. We'll hide the cube, and we've got a bit of something. We'll delete that again, bring back my cube. And what I like to do is just turn up the noise all the way up, so we get a bit more randomness, and hit OK. And now we can hide the cube, and we've got what kind of looks like rocks. It doesn't look like rocks at the moment, but believe me, it does. If we try and scale this, it's scaling all of them. If we go up here and change this from median point to individual origins, we can scale the rocks down a little bit. So you can see they're all individual. And now, this is where the cool bit happens. I'm just going to move this over because I don't want it. You'll see why. I don't want them falling off the edge of the world. And I'll bring them down a bit. We're now going to add a rigid body. And we want it to be active, because when we play this, nothing happens. It should do. We should have lost one. I know why. Let's just remove that for now. You need to select at least one as the active object. Add the rigid body, and one of them should fall when we hit play on the animation thing. That's exactly what we want. Because they're going to be rocks, and because I don't want them to bounce or slide around or anything, I'm going to make them really, really heavy, like 500 kilos. I'm going to change it from convex hull to mesh so that they interact correctly with each other when they fall. I'm going to change the surface response. I'm going to turn the friction all the way up because we don't want them to slide around. And I'm going to turn the margin down to 0 so that when they fall, they are supposed to actually touch each other and they won't kind of float above. If you want there to be a little bit of gap between objects, you can increase that, but I just turn it all the way down. And then under object,
You got to do the ground.
rigid body, you want to copy from active because at the moment only the one item is fallen. So if you hit copy from active, then when we hit play, all of the objects fall. But now we want the ground to be to have a collider. So we're going to set a rigid body on that. And we're going to make that passive because we don't want the ground to fall. It's just got to sit there and basically be a collider for the rocks to sit on. We'll leave everything else as it is. We'll turn the friction up, I think, and we'll turn the collision margin down again because we want the rocks to either land on the ground or it doesn't matter if they're a little bit through the ground because, you know, hey-ho, that's what rocks are like. So now, if we hit play, they all just fall. And some of them will bounce around a bit because that's just the way the physics work with Blender. You could fiddle on with the settings, but to be honest, I wouldn't worry. Just give it a bit of time for them to settle. So it's already done all of that. I'm going to go all the way to the end of the animation. I'm quite happy with where all the rocks have landed, except for that one that's in the house, but I'll just delete that in a minute. Select all of your rocks again. And then if you go to Object, Apply, and Visual Transform, deselect everything, come all the way up to here and remove your rigid body world. When you select your objects, your rigid body should have been removed from everything. So now they're fixed in place. If we hit play, nothing happens. And we've got all these bits of rocks that's lying around. And I'm going to get rid of that one because I don't like the fact it went through the wall and landed inside the shed. So I'm just going to delete it. Now you will find when you come to select all of these, I'll just grab them. If you hit the period key on the numpad, sometimes you'll find it'll zoom way out here and you think, what the hell's happened? And quite often that is because you've got an empty object which has basically fallen and it's not, or a rock perhaps could have fallen through the ground and is way miles down there. So what I tend to do is I tend to turn off selection on most things if I don't want it to be selected. You can go up to filters and just choose that, and then anything you don't want to be selected, just mark it. I don't want any of those selected. You can do that just by clicking and dragging down. So the only things that can be selected are these items here. So I'm going to go to front view and we'll go into X-ray mode, select one of these and then just select everything. And then if I hit Control and I to invert the selection, You can see the only thing really that I can see is possibly one little empty that's sitting there. Nothing has fallen right down through the world, but we'll hit delete anyway. Is there anything here that's showing? Nah, that's actually turned out quite good. So we'll go back here, select everything, and then if you want, yeah, if you're happy with that, you could join them all together. Have a look at your mesh, make sure it's not horrific. I mean, yeah, that probably is a bit overkill but for a pile of rocks, but the nice thing about it is you could reuse that elsewhere. You could flip it over, you could rotate it a bit, put it elsewhere in your scene. Nobody would know that it's the same mesh that you're using, and it's a good way of reusing as much as possible, and cutting down on the amount of stuff that Unity has to load in, and hold in memory basically to render it. So we'll export that. I'm just going to call it, let's put it where it needs to go. Stick it in there. I'll call it rocks. Have I applied? No, I need to apply the rotation and scale. Bring in me rocks. And then all you need to do after that, if you're lazy like me and you can't be bothered to unwrap it, create a second UV channel for your light maps. Just tick that and see if Unity does a reasonable job. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And then, now have I used, yes I have used a triplanar shader for this one. I do show in another video, but I'm happy to show you again how to create a shader that will just wrap your texture around your object without having to unwrap it. And it's just using the triplanar nodes in Amplify. Actually, that's a bit too complicated because what I've done is I've packed all of my grayscale maps as well, which isn't great. Leave that there. Yeah, I should have cleaned this up. But yeah, me ambient occlusion, me roughness, me metallic are all in one texture here. I've just put them in separate channels so that I can then split it up and just plug in the RGB into wherever they are on here. And that's a good method as well for optimizing your scene. If you're going to be using PBR textures, try to use as few textures as you possibly can. And an excellent way is to pack all your grayscale maps into one texture. So that's all I did with that. I'll just save it. And because it's triplanar, it is actually doing all the calculations to wrap the texture around the object. Now, of course, I've messed that up, haven't I, and deleted stuff I probably shouldn't have done. But hey ho. Is it just because I'm missing a texture? More than likely, yeah. I certainly am. I've deleted one of these. So we're going to call this the colour. And we'll try plugging that back in. Where did I put it is the question. Ooh, good question. Let's see. Did I call it stone? Did I call it rock? There we go. Let's try plugging that in. That'll do. Okay. So, I haven't even unwrapped it. I haven't bothered unwrapping it. and I've ticked generate light map view UV, so I haven't even unwrapped that. I've done it as quick as possible, flung the texture on it. Let's see if it actually works. I'm just going to render with bakery this time. Just because bakery is so much quicker. For the purposes of a lesson, we don't want to be spending half the time sitting here waiting for Unity to do its own stuff. Plus bakery just does a better job. And I don't think that's bad. I don't think that's bad at all. Let's just of course I've got selection turned off on everything now, haven't I? Yes, I have. So let's just make sure we can select everything. Come on. Grass. Save a copy. So we've got our grass. I'm just going to very quickly bring in a plane. And we'll just stick that on there as it is. Materials. Bring the smoothness down and let's just bring the tiling up a little bit. Put it where it's supposed to be. It's not quite right. We'll move this out over here. Now then, where's me? Oh, it's already ticked. Sorry about that. I'm just having a bit of a blonde moment there. Couldn't find what I was looking for on the inspector. So I'll give that a bake. And I think I very briefly covered something last week. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. We've got some shadows on the ground. They're very black. If you've got problems with really black shadows, and if you use bakery, this only applies to bakery, it's because you're missing a skylight. So I'm going to create a skylight. And I'm going to give it a bit of a bluish colour that matches the skybox kind of thing. And if we bake it again, that should fix it and the shadows should be much more realistic. Now, while
bakery for free?
Bakery's not for free, no, and it isn't cheap. You can get it on the Unity Asset Store. I think it's usually about $60 or something, but it goes on sale regularly. Especially like Black Friday and, you know, just keep an eye on it in Unity. You'll see it come down to at least half price quite regularly. Also keep an eye on Humble Bundle because you can often get it cheap on there as well. In fact, I think I've seen Bakery and Amplify Shader Editor in a Humble Bundle before, and it was really quite cheap. So just keep an eye on it. But you'll see the shadows now are much more realistic now that we've got a skylight in.
Can I make them more soft if I wanted to? Is there an option for like, or is it the light that does that? Soft shadows?
Good question, because I've never really played around with it that much. I believe you can adjust the intensity. with direct lights, I don't think you can do an awful lot, but with point lights and shadows, spotlights, you absolutely
it says
can.
right there, shadow type.
Well, yeah, the shadow type, but hard shadows generally you get jaggedy edges. If you want to soften the shadows, for instance, a good way would be to increase the samples in bakery. But that again is really more for point lights. The thing is with direct lights, if you can imagine light rays, or it doesn't matter where this direct light, it's not going to make any difference in the world what's going to happen with the shadows, because the light only goes in one direction. If you can imagine parallel rays coming from all around, all going in the same direction. But with a point light, it's more like a sphere where you're getting light coming off at all different directions. And with a spotlight, it's coming off in a cone, but in different directions. And therefore, if you have, for instance, say 3 samples, what it's doing is it's sending 3 light rays out, as an example, at different directions, and you could get 3 shadows overlapping one another, which might look a bit odd on an object. If you increase the samples, so it's sending more light rays out, as many as possible, then it is going to generate a lot of shadows, but they're all going to blur into one another, and they'll be a lot softer and a lot more natural looking. So usually when I'm baking, I'll start off with a low number of samples, but for me final bake for a world, I'll crank it right up to maximum, just to get the best possible result, really. It'll take a lot longer, but it's worth doing in a lot of cases, especially in dark areas, because you'll often find that dark corners will be pitch black, but if you crank your samples up, there'll be just enough light gets in there for you to be able to see in those little dark areas and still have the lit areas look good without having to turn up the intensity of your light and having those areas bleached out. So yeah, play around with your samples, definitely. I was going to have a look at tree it again. That's 2 weeks in a run. I was going to have a look at this for making trees, where you can make decent low poly trees. This is free. Again, I've run out of time and I haven't been able to do it. But I'll try and cover it next week. And I'll find the URL as well so you can get to it. It's easy enough to find though. But I'll find the URL and I'll post it in the video when we cover it. But yeah, we've kind of run out of time. I haven't covered anywhere near the amount of stuff I wanted to cover, so we'll continue again next week with the same stuff and try and expand on it. I think we'll probably spend the last few minutes just answering questions, and if anybody has any. Is Pox just waving because he likes the look of himself, or do you have a question?
I'm just waving for the camera.
Okay, that's fine.
No, I'm having a question.
I want to see myself move my hands.
Okie dokie. Well, if that's it, I will end the recording.
Thank you, Lisa.